Welcome to another episode of Peers Over Beers, your favorite digital and social evangelist podcast, with your industry veteran hosts, Chris Detzel. This podcast starts now.
So, welcome to another Peers Over Beers. This is Chris Detzel, and I have a special guest with me, Nicole Saunders. Nicole, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Nice to be here, Chris. I'm Nicole Saunders. I'm the Director of Communities at Zendesk. I've been at Zendesk for about 5 years now, and I've been working in the community management industry, I think as long as the title has been around. I actually remember the day that I was sitting on Twitter, and I think it was one of the first community manager appreciation days, and I saw the tag go out, and I went, "Oh, community management, that's what I do." And I put it on my resume and my LinkedIn. And I've been doing it ever since. So yeah, it was good to find my people.
You know, it's funny. I was telling you or talking to you right before the show, and we've never really had a conversation before. So I was really excited that when I reached out, that you said, "Yeah, I'll do it. Let's have a conversation." And here you are. So thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've seen you around on LinkedIn. I know that we participate in a couple of the same community manager groups and our own communities for community managers. And I always love talking about community stuff with anybody that'll listen, and especially people that know the industry.
Yeah, me too. And as you know, I've had this podcast for a little while. So why don't we dig right in? So tell me a little bit about your team. And I could tell you a little bit about my team, or me for now. And then what we wanted to kind of talk about was planning, budgeting, and all that kind of stuff. And what do you plan for the start of the year? It's January now. Maybe you guys have already done it. Our fiscal year is February, so it starts FY23. And so we're in the midst of closing our planning now and looking at one headcount or, strategy. What are we going to be doing for this next year and all that kind of stuff, budget, stuff like that. So why don't you kick it off with a little bit about kind of what your team is, what your community kind of goal is, and then let's talk about budgeting and planning stuff. Is that cool?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot to unpack there. It's been an interesting journey with community at Zendesk. So like I said, I've been there about 5 years. When I first started at Zendesk, it was me and one other person, and her role was largely kind of functioning as a support rep in the community, so answering user questions. Yeah. Over time, we've built that out. So I now have a team of 6 that report to me. Wow. So it's been a lot of growth, a lot of expansion. We also moved our team. We used to be under the support organization, and now we are a little more centralized in the integrated marketing team. So we've really sort of been working on shifting and expanding the scope of our community and what it does. And that contributed to that team growth. As far as planning goes, we are right in the thick of it right now. My team's actually doing their roadmap presentations next week. I'm really excited to hear what they've got planned and what they're working on.
That could be a little scary for beginner community managers, is putting a roadmap together and then have to present to Nicole and whoever else is there, because they already know the stuff. So that, but that's good. I think employees need that, right?
It's really good practice. At the end of the day, I'm the one that ends up taking the roadmap up to executives and getting all of the approvals and buy-in. But I wouldn't know how to do it if my previous manager hadn't made me do one on a regular basis for her. And so this is the first time I've got my whole team doing all of it. But I think it's going to be a really good exercise for everybody. I think those are some key skill sets you have to have in our industry. You have to be able to put together a good deck and articulate what you're going to work on and why those are the important things to be doing. So that's really what we're kind of going step by step through right now, giving everybody some practice.
I love that. I really do. I think whenever I was at a company called Rexel, so that's where I met Michael, and he taught me all things strategy, not necessarily definitely community, but look, you have to have a strategy, and that's going to be the high level of what are you trying to accomplish, right? And then underneath that is how are you going to go execute on that strategy? And so what is your roadmap? And so when you look at, not our company likes like 30, 60, 90, 120s, but I think, if you could look out, quarterly is what I used to kind of do and really like to say, hey, I'm going to accomplish this quarter, that quarter. Is that kind of how you guys do it? Or is that what are you thinking from a roadmap standpoint? What does that look like?
Yeah, I think we like to break things down in quarters. I also like to look at things sort of in half years because there's so many things that are going to take, 4 or 5 months to get through. So you can break down milestones by quarter, but especially with community, oftentimes it's a longer term play. It's not something where you're going to do something and see the result 2 weeks later, but it's where you're going to build something over the course of several quarters or even several years sometimes.
Yeah, it's like, one of the things, so Reltio, we started our community back in April 28th of last year. So, it's very new. And people are so excited about it and everything else, and we're doing some really good things, but you've got to pull it in a little bit because things don't just happen overnight. And so I'll give you an example. Like when you look at some of the analytics on Google, right? And so page views or users or whatever, it's just going up and down, right? Like it's not, when you look at SEO growth, I mean, look, that stuff takes a year, 2 years, 3 years to really kind of, go skyrocket. And so when you got to explain, well, why is it down every single month or up and down? It's like, just the way it is, like you're building a bunch of content and it's brand new, it's from scratch, but you have to be able to explain some of those things to the executives. And if you don't, then they'll be like, they just need to understand, right?
Absolutely. And, I think it's so important, taking an example of Google Analytics. I like to look at stats year over year and see how things compare. And one of the things that we've learned, there's very much seasonal traffic in the community. Mm-hmm. We know which months we see the most engagement. We know which months it regularly dips. But if you don't look at it in that longer time scale, you can be like, oh gosh, our page views crashed in August. What happens? Well, it turns out they crash every August because people's kids go back to school and they get distracted. And so you have to really always have that perspective of both the short term and the long term. But I think that that's something that I am forever trying to communicate out to folks. I think a lot of people have this impression with communities that it's like social media and you're going to do something and it's going to go viral and blow up overnight. And that is not how communities work. They definitely build over time. And like you said, you're building content, you're building SEO, you're building a relationship and a reputation with your members. And that takes time to really gain the full benefit of.
I thought we were going to talk about budgeting, but I'm really liking where this conversation is going, to be honest. And so I agree. I think that, when you look at, and it's a good point about the social media thing, because, it's not going to blow up. It takes time. And what I tell people is community is not a project, right? It's a program that just continues to go on. It's almost like a living, breathing thing, right? Because people come in, and I love the relationship thing that you mentioned, because as I get more and more into the community, and as I kind of look at those users and I engage with them, not just digitally. We have a webinar program that I run as well, and so people are always now coming and asking me questions that it's like, of course I don't know the answer, so I'm still having to push that out. But they're personally coming to me. They're going on contact us. Hey Chris, it's community manager at Reltio, but they know exactly how to get in touch with me, right? And so it's a fun thing to do, but it becomes a lot of work. So you built this team of 6. What kind of things did you do to kind of really say, hey, look, I need another head, and then another, and then another, right?
Yeah.
Love to kind of hear more about that. I know it's all over the place, but
headcount is interesting. It's a chicken and egg thing, right? Because a lot of the time you're sitting there, especially if you're a team of 1 or a team of 2, and you're saying, I can't do anything unless I have more people to help me.
Yeah.
But the real key to getting headcount is demonstrating that you can do something and that you have an impact, and then being able to say, and I can double that impact if I get more people. And so, I think the step 1 that a lot of people don't always realize is demonstrating what you can do and demonstrating a little bit of value. So sometimes that means being really strategic in what you pursue, right? And setting yourself up and saying, I'm going to pursue this specific project so I can demonstrate some impact. And that's going to give me the ability to go in and say, I did this, and we can do it twice as big or 4 times as big or more often or whatever it is, if you get that additional headcount. But you got to show a little bit of value first. I think the other key really is being able to articulate what additional headcount will do for the business, right? Will it make your life and your team's life easier? Absolutely. Will you be able to move faster? Definitely. But you're going to have to quantify that for the business. Nobody's going to invest in it if they don't know what they're going to get back out of it. And each headcount is a big investment for the company when you think about the time and the money and the training and all of the things that go into it. So, with our first hire, it was, hey, we're answering all of the questions around this one product. We could answer all of the questions about all of the products if we have more people. Because at the time when I started, we actually had separate communities for each product, which was an interesting way to distribute things. And so I was like, I want to merge these all together, get everybody in one room, but we're going to need another person to help with those questions if we're going to add 4 times as many questions into this one space. So that first headcount, that was easy to justify because it was taking what we were doing and adding to it. Now, as I continued to build out my team, I started adding new roles. Mm-hmm. And some of that came with, I mentioned that we moved from the support organization over to the marketing organization, which is a whole adventure that we might have to save for another episode.
Hey, I would love to, because I just moved to the marketing organization from the customer success organization. So yes.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. And I know that there's a big debate in our industry about where a community team should live. My one soundbite on that is to say that communities connect into every part of the business. I was listening to the conversation that you had with Jenny a couple of weeks back, and she was going about like, okay, well, marketing wants it for this, and success wants it for this, and product wants it for this, and it's true. And so to me, to a certain extent, it doesn't necessarily matter so much where the community sits, so long as it's well-resourced and well-supported, because you're going to be working super cross-functionally, no matter where in the organization you are. But you wanted to talk about budget. You want to sit someplace where you're going to have a budget and you're going to be able to get some headcount. And that's not usually sitting in a cost center. It's usually sitting in one of the revenue generating parts of the business.
Marketing. I agree.
Yeah. But yeah, as we move to the marketing team, that was an opportunity for me to really say, okay, we're moving where our team is. We're changing the scope of the community. We're going to be more than just a support community. We're really going to start building out brand ambassadors, and we're really going to start focusing on customer success. So we need some new functions. And so I actually doubled the size of my team last year. I said, all right, I need 3 entirely new people. So I hired someone to do our user program. So focusing on user groups and customer advocacy and our user recognitions in the community. I decided I needed somebody that was full-time going to work on driving traffic to the community, a marketing person, to really give some time and energy to that. And then possibly the best decision I ever made was hiring an operations person. So somebody who could just really like make sure the train is staying on the tracks and doing all of that. And I really lucked out. I found somebody that could do operations and analytics. So I got an ops person and an analyst in one. And my gosh, I recommend it to every community manager out there. Find somebody that can do that stuff for you.
Gosh, all the things that you're saying resonate in big ways. And I always kind of think, what's the first, we are looking at hiring a community manager here shortly, just because my role has expanded. I now own communities, but also the executive council. So it's hard to do both, right? Alone. And so hopefully I'll get that headcount. But I was thinking operations person would be awesome, an analytics person would be awesome, but I need somebody to run the community. I need a content person. I need, you know what I mean? So it's like, okay, you're not going to get all those things. And so you just got to figure out, within your community, what is it what you need first, and then you got to build upon that. And it sounds like you've done an extremely good job in doing that. So congratulations.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm very happy with the team we have. I'm very happy with the way we've grown. I would say if I was to go back and do it again, I probably would have hired a content specialist earlier. I ended up covering that sort of content role for a long time until we got some additional space, and still do some of it to this day. And that content person is so key, because that's the person that's going to take, events that you do and figure out how to bring that back into the community and break those down in digestible pieces and make sure that you're getting things all distributed. And it's such a key thing. So, but it's so interesting. Every community team is a little bit different. Every community role is a little bit different. And at the end of the day, I've found the best is just to play to people's strengths and interests and really figure out where they can contribute the most and design it that way.
I feel like that there's probably not an exact right way to kind of go about it. I mean, but it sounds like how I start communities could be way different than how you started a community, but yet you're thriving and we're starting to thrive. You know what I mean? And so it just, and we could go in depth, later to kind of think about, what is it that you did to really kind of get that community thriving, to get that buy-in and that kind of stuff. I love how you've got a lot of people under you and you've been very focused in on, those different roles, because business starts coming to me in a lot of different ways. I think I talked about this last week, but you've got product coming. They want ideation. They want feedback. They want to get these people in on community, maybe these private communities to help with product adoption. That's not just a new one, but it's like, Chris, what can we do on, getting this person to adopt this new product? Chris, what can we do to get, and like you said, like, how do you get the advocacy program going? People are, wanting that. Chris, I need interviews on, some input from the executive council on, let's say, the branding project that we're doing, all this. And I'm like, okay, Chris, that's not the only one, with these relationships, I don't think.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so, it becomes a lot, so
it really does. It's communities can be such a dynamic engine throughout the business, right? Like I said, you touch all these parts. We've been talking a lot this year about sort of weaving the fabric of the customer experience has been our mantra, but really the community can become that connective tissue between all of those other teams and departments. And I think the hardest thing is how do you, going back to sort of our initial thoughts on like planning and being strategic, how do you focus? Because it is true that every team in the company wants something and sees possibility with the community. And I mean, it's everything from like, the traditional ones of product and marketing and success. We've even got things like our corporate social responsibility team wants to know how we can bring our environmental causes to the front and how could we talk to customers about what they're doing to be more green. And it is so cool. Like it is an amazing thing when you've got people from all over the business clamoring and coming to you with this. But it's also that thing of like, I'm sitting here being like, wow, I've grown my team to 6. And we totally do not have enough bandwidth to do all of this stuff. Like,
so it never matters
so much. Yeah, like you're always going to want more people. And so that's where it becomes so important to understand, like, what's the biggest focus? Where are the places you can make the most impact and really kind of dig into those pieces?
I love how you brought this back around to the original. This was great. I need somebody like that because I'm really good at
keep the conversation focused.
Yeah. And so the planning piece is true. My boss asked me the other day, he goes, all right, so we have we call it company kickoff. So instead of SCO, whatever it is, it's still salesy, but, and I've got to present on version 2 of community because, version 1's done for the first year for the most part. So what does version 2 look like? And so, I've been in the planning stages of thinking about what does community look like, right? And so what are some of the things that we're going to do next year, or let's say this year, really, to move the community forward, and so that's always fun, but it's hard to think about. It's like, well, am I going to get a head count? Because if I'm going to get a head count, that changes everything. You know what I mean? So, so it's still thinking about that. You don't want to present to the company and say, this is all the things that's going to happen, because thinking I'm going to have this thing, so you gotta be strategic in how you kind of say and until you kind of know.
Well, and sometimes I've gone in and presented as options, kind of given them a menu, right? Like and said that. Like, all right, if we've got the team we have today, here's what we're going to do. Now, I would like to add this program, and here's the value that I think it could bring to the company, but we can only do that if we get this headcount, this budget, this technical resource, whatever it is that we need. And then you sort of give people that opportunity to make that choice and say, well, okay, what do we want to get out of community and how are we going to do this? And then usually what they're going to do is say, well, how close to that can you get with your existing resources, right? There's always going to be a negotiation there. So, always mark up a little bit what you're asking for, knowing that it's going to get negotiated down.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, it's key. And, I think there's so much talk in community industry about like, how do you tie what you're doing in your community to the business goals? And it's an interesting thing because there's always a balance to be struck between supporting the business goals and doing what's best for users. And ideally those things always align, but sometimes it can get you a little off track, right? And you got to make sure that you're balancing those two sets of needs. And, sometimes you see things that would be really great for the users. It would really encourage the community to thrive. And maybe it doesn't align to a specific business goal.
Yeah.
So I'm always trying to find, what's the 60-40? How can we have most of what we're doing contributing to those goals, but also have that little bit of room in reserve for the things that are just about nurturing the people or just about what they want,
Absolutely. I think, at the end of the day, we're here for a reason, right? It's for business, and we have to some degree tie, what we're trying to do to those business goals. So what are the outcomes we're trying to achieve, but they need to be at that level. And I think you're absolutely right. If they're not, and you're just doing a bunch of shit, that, it's here, there, whatever, it's good, but it's not going to accomplish at the end of the day what you're looking for. And your executives will stop buying in and be like, I don't know what the hell you're doing. You know what I mean?
You can keep yourself wildly busy and have no impact on the business. It's amazing. And so it is important to weigh those things. And like you're saying, if you're going to ask for budget, if you're going to ask for headcount, you're going to have to be able to articulate what the business is going to get back out of it. And then really be able to demonstrate that, that age-old return on investment.
Yeah, no, it's true. And look, that part's not easy, and it's I think that, I don't know about you, but for me, I sometimes struggle with that, but you have to push through it. You have to kind of understand none of us are perfect at doing everything. So you got to find those, let's call it a resource of some sort, not necessarily a headcount, but somebody that maybe can help you understand, how to do something better. So if I'm terrible at presentations, well, I better get somewhat good at it. One, two is I've got to be able to tell a story of some sort, and if you don't know how to do that, read some books, talk to Nicole or whatever, I'm serious. You have to engage and interact in a lot of different ways. And that's, to me, is the key, is storytelling, presenting in front of a bunch of people to really tell that story, and you've got to be able to do it on slides. Sometimes I'll just do it, I'll share my screen and say, hey, look, here's some great questions here. Hey, let me search on Google and show you kind of, you know what I mean? Like, so, but it's at least pulling out some of those stories, I think, that, are going to connect to your audience or to the business people, the leaders, whoever, right?
I love that you're bringing this up right now, because of course, we're coming up on Community Manager Appreciation Day on Monday. And I know there's a big thing in the industry this year, encouraging everyone to take it as a professional development day. And so we've done that at Zendesk. I've given the whole team the full day to go read books on community management, come listen to the podcast, attend one of the webinars or events, that kind of thing. But it is true that there are certain skills we have to build. And let's be honest, most people hate public speaking. Yeah. Not me. I'm one of those random weirdos that loves being behind a microphone on a stage. At least after the first 5 minutes, I'm always nervous, and then I warm up and you can't drag me off.
Well, but, if you weren't nervous, it would be, it'd be kind of weird. We all get nervous.
Yeah. So. Even Adele says that she gets nervous, and she's one of the biggest stars in the world. Right. But so it is so important to build those.
Oh, by the way, my wife loves her. I like her too, but
who doesn't? How can you not?
Yeah. She's really good.
She's an amazing. She's one of those people. She's got one of those talents. You're just like, how is that? How is there actually a person in the world that is that talented?
That's right.
But I digress.
It's okay.
No, I think that building those skills is so important, though, especially those ones that any job you ever have, you're gonna need to be able to articulate what you're doing and why, and tell a compelling story around it. And there are so many things out there about, you can read books and, again, listen to podcasts, go to webinars and things like that. I strongly encourage people, go take a class on storytelling. Go through a webinar that talks about slide design. When you see great slides that people have, ask if you can steal the format.
Yes.
Copy that and use it in your own decks. Yep. It's a little fake it till you make it with slide design, but that's fine. Everybody does it. But yeah, taking some time to do some professional development, maybe that's even outside of the scope of your program. Every class you take doesn't have to be on community management. Go do one on storytelling, go do one on presenting, go do one on public speaking. Take an improv class so you get more comfortable being on stage and things like that,
I love that. And something that I used to do, and maybe we should have just done a whole episode on that, but something that
I feel like we've got 6 episodes here. We can just break this up and keep going with each topic.
I'm gonna have a hard time typing out the notes. We talked about this and this, but it is what it is.
It's our getting to know you episode, right? We're just touching on all the things, then we can drill deeper in future ones.
Yeah, let's do it. But I do want to say this is that the hardest thing for me at the very beginning, probably 6 or 7 years ago, was getting in front of a bunch of people and speaking. So more specifically around people that are experts and higher levels than me and everything else. And so, to get over that, what I started to do was I I would have signed up for conferences or just being a speaker on certain things because it pushed me to be able to at least get in front of people and say some shit. You know what I mean? Like about,
Yeah.
in my case, community, right? Like, and I was like, if I just sign up and just tell people I want to speak and do all these things, and just consistently do it, then eventually I'm going to get good at this, And then, so I started doing that. But the one thing that put me over the top was whenever I went to Imperva, my last gig, and, I was the only person in community. And when I started this community from scratch, which I know what I was doing for the most part, but there's a lot I didn't know. But people looked at me as the expert. I had no choice but to get in front of people, get in front of executives, and all of those things. So sometimes, you just have to push yourself to do it. Just say, okay, yes, I want to do all the things that Nicole said, but at some point I've got to get out and, I don't know who the vendors that you're using, but vendors, for example, love to get case studies. Vendors love, they all have, nice little forums or, things like that you can go to, and they want somebody to speak about their particular topic, right? And so that's my recommendation is just get yourself out there, do it.
I completely agree. Even if it's just like presenting to your own team,
yeah,
or like your roommate or your significant other, be like, can I practice for 20 minutes presenting what I do to you, because you don't know anything about it. You're not in community.
Exactly.
You don't work in my industry. I need to explain this to you and see if you understand it, because that means that the leaders that I'm presenting to will understand it. And the real key to it, it's all about confidence. And the reality is most of us forget how much we know and don't realize how much of an expert we are. One time I was going to help somebody set up their Twitter account, and I'd written down this little agenda of okay, we're going to get their handle, and I'm going to explain hashtags, and I'm going to explain app mentions. And we ended up spending the whole hour just picking out their username. And it was one of those things that made me realize oh, I was thinking the basics are this list of things that are going to take hours to get this person through, because they don't even understand the basic concept of well, why do I need a username? And how should I pick one? And what does it need to represent? And, this is for their business account. So we had to talk about all these things about what is the brand and what kind of message are you trying to get across? What is the purpose of this account? And what do people need to know when they come across your page? And it was one of those moments for me that made me realize oh my gosh, I know all of this stuff about Twitter. I actually am an expert, even though I'm sitting here thinking these are just basic things. And so, I would encourage everyone to think about the fact that you were hired in your role because you already had a certain level of expertise. And every day that you're in that role, you're building on that expertise. And so when somebody asks you to go present about that area, you are the expert, and you should always represent yourself as that and go in with that confidence of knowing that you know more about your space than anybody else in the room. Even if you're talking to the CEO, you probably know more about your specific program than that person. And your job is to educate them.
That's right. The CEO will come to you and say, Chris, what do you think about or what are customers saying about, or what do they think about this? Because he doesn't know. He wants to know. You know what I mean? And he assumes that I know, and so hopefully I do. And I think, but the other side of that, I think, is if you don't know some certain thing, don't make it up. Don't be scared to say, I'm not sure. It's okay. But the answer will come at some point. Go find out, go figure it out. That kind of stuff. It's just get yourself out there. And so to kind of go back to what I love, what you're doing is you're pushing your team to build roadmaps, which is at first it's a really hard thing to do. To me, it's just a bunch of ideas and throwing it out there, and then taking those ideas and say, okay, well, what do we really want to focus on? What can we actually accomplish? And say, well, can we do this in Q1, 2, 3, et cetera? But I love it because that's a huge exercise that will help them get far, in their career. And especially, it's really cool to watch when they build that roadmap, them to execute on most of the things that they do on that roadmap. That's going to be the fun thing.
Right. Well, and it makes your work life so much easier when you think of written down, right? You don't have those in your show okay, what am I going to do to change the world today? It's oh, it's the next item on my little list here.
Yeah.
But no, roadmaps can be intimidating. And I think one of the keys to it is to start putting those dates on the calendar, right? And saying okay, well, I want to launch my first user group in June. Okay, well, what happens to happen between now and June in order to do that? And then what else is going on? Is there a big product release or a big event at the company that's going to get in the way, or that you're going to have to work around, or that maybe you want to use as a springboard for that program? And once you start mapping it out, that's actually, I think my favorite thing about road mapping is when you can look at the list and be like, oh, we committed to 6 things in March. That's not realistic. How can we
smooth that out?
Or how do we reprioritize? Because, it's the thing that's really going to help you avoid getting overcommitted and overstretched, and really being able to get clear on what you're going to execute and what resources you need to get there, and when people can expect these things to show up. And it just clarifies so much. It makes your work life so much easier. And it makes those conversations about budget, about headcount, about resources a lot easier when you've got that clarity of, why you need them and when.
I agree. Nicole, it's been really good. And I really appreciate you coming on today, because I've learned a lot. It's funny because you and I are in somewhat similar industries, right? It's a different, I guess, product, but it's still a product that we sell to people. And so we have a lot of similarities. And I think there could be some huge opportunities for us to collaborate on, on this show, if you want, about just specific areas. Could be, how do you go about content strategy, or how do you go about, user groups, or how do you go, whatever those are, how do you talk to business about certain things if you're interested? So this was really good.
Yeah, no, this has been great. Like you said, I feel like there's a depth of a depth and breadth of topics that we can cover here. So I look forward to digging into more of them a little bit more, and focusing our conversations on a couple of specific things.
Let's do it. Well,
awesome.
This kind of concludes the Peers Over Beers. My name is Chris Detzel, and Nicole Saunders. Thank you so much for coming today.
Yeah, thanks again for having me. We'll talk soon.
All right.